Hi, and welcome to Ellie's Life. Today we're going to be sharing our experience with you about a miracle that took place with Ellie's head, with her brain, and we're going to tell you all about it right now, so here we go.
At 20 weeks, when we were pregnant with Ellie, we got the news that our little girl had brain malformations and hydrocephalus. We had this at our anatomy scan when we were looking forward to finding out if we had a boy or a girl. Instead, we got bad news that she had very bad malformations. So she had a brain malformation that was diagnosed as schizencephaly, which means that she was missing 2/3 of her brain. This was also confirmed with an ultrasound and then with a fetal MRI also at about 33 weeks.
So the maternal fetal medicine doctor said in regards to her brain growing that the die is cast is what he said. We asked him if there's going to be a chance that her brain could grow after birth. You know, we don't know anything about brains or anything, so we're asking the professional. And he said, no, the die is cast. This is when Eleanor was still in the womb. He said that it might get a little bit larger, but there won't be any more brain. He said, it'll be impossible. And actually the concept of her even doing good was so ridiculous to him that he was literally laughing while he was saying all of it and telling us how bad her condition was and how impossible things were. Meanwhile, you know, she's devastated and crying, and I'm sitting there just like, why is this guy laughing?
So she also had a second diagnosis of hydrocephalus, which is extra water on the brain. That's actually what it's called, is water on the brain. And so what that means is that you're supposed to have ventricles that have fluid in them. Well, she had an excess of fluid in her brain, and it was so large that she had way more liquid than brain in her head. And that pressure from all of that liquid building up pushes on the brain matter that is there and damages it. So she had that in addition to schizencephaly. So by 37 weeks, we had to deliver via C-section because her head was so large and swollen up from the hydrocephalus. Then after birth, she had a second MRI the next morning to confirm her diagnosis of schizencephaly, and the picture looked exactly the same. She just had little swoops of brain, and the rest was just fluid filled in her head.
Yeah, so at this point, I wanted to ask the neurosurgeon now what the chances were of her brain growing or developing more, and he said that it was impossible. He said what she has is all that she will ever have. That's what he said. The shunt was placed at 5 days old. It was to relieve pressure in Ellie's head, and it was to give her the best chance and best quality of life, best chance to live, the best length of life. So we went ahead and we had him put the shunt in at 5 days old. And then we noticed that the pressure was going down in her head very quickly. At 2 months old, we asked the neurosurgeon, when Ellie was 2 months old, we had another appointment, asked him about getting a scan of her brain to make sure that there was room for more growth, because her plates, as you could see, had overlapped so much. We wanted to make sure that things were going good inside of her head. They hadn't done any scans since the shunt was placed. So he said, well, we'll get a scan at 3 months.
So when we went back at 3 months, he tried to put us off again. And he was like, well, we'll get it next time. And he thought it was quite unnecessary to get another scan done since the brain would not grow anyway. There was lots of extra room in her skull for the small amount of brain that she had, even if that little bit grew, you know, a tiny bit. There was plenty of extra space, so he really didn't think it was necessary. But we pushed for the scan anyways, just to be sure. So we got a CT scan finally and went back to the neurosurgeon for the results at 4 months old. And the neurosurgeon said to me, he said, well, there's actually been quite a bit of growth and development on her brain, because I had asked, if there was any changes with the scan. I wasn't really expecting any at all. But this is the picture that he showed us of what her scan looked like now, which was incredible. So then he said, well, it's hard to know if this will mean anything good for her. So he immediately discounted the miracle. The thing he said was impossible had just happened, and he discounted it right away. and just excuse it, even though he told us that that was not possible at all. So evidently not having a brain was bad, and having a brain is still bad in his opinion, because he refused to acknowledge the big changes that had happened. So all of the doctors that we had ever seen, ever since 20 weeks of her being in the womb, had all said, and even reconfirmed at birth, that she only had a tiny bit of brain and that growth and development was impossible. So this is literally a miracle from the Lord. So that night when we got home, I was reading my Bible, and I wasn't looking for anything in particular, and I came straight to a verse that was Psalm 109, verse 27, and it said, "So they may know that this is your hand, and that you, Lord, have done it." So this is literally a miracle from the Lord. He showed that verse to me, and I knew exactly what it meant right away. I hadn't been looking for it or anything. But the fact is that this was something that he did, and he did it perfectly. So because of all the ways that it had been reiterated, how impossible it was, and then he stepped in and did it. To show that this was his hand that did it, that it wasn't a fluke, it wasn't them just getting a scan wrong or something like that. It was literally a miracle by the hand of the Lord. So we have learned a lot through this. God just does whatever he wants, and he answers to no one.
So after we got this amazing news that Ellie's brain had developed so much, filling her head, then is interesting all the excuses we would hear from people that reject, or they refuse, they resist the Lord. So one of them was, water was probably just blocking the brain in the first images so that they couldn't see all of the brain matter, right? That's probably what it was. And I said, no, that's not what it is, because as the doctors told us, the doctors had said, because we'd asked the doctors about this, are we seeing all the brain matter here? And the doctors were like, they got this look on, the neurosurgeon got his look on his face, and he's like, well, of course we could still see all the brain matter. That's why we see all the different levels, the different layers in the brain. There's no water blocking anything. And I was like, okay, well, just wanted to make sure. That was before actually anything. So, and we had found out about her miracle. It was before that. So we already knew that their scans were accurate, and with that they could see the shunt tube, as you can see in the picture, going into her brain as well. And also, if you stop and think about it, when the baby is in the womb and they do an ultrasound, you wouldn't be able to ever see the baby because there's fluid surrounding the baby. So, they can see through fluid. That is not an excuse that people can make. It just doesn't work.
That's true. And also with that, anytime that a baby has had the pressure from the fluid pressing on the brain, once the pressure is relieved with a shunt, sometimes it'll be like something that's compressed, and then it'll like boing out a little bit because of the pressure being relieved. It does not just grow like that from pressure being relieved. I've seen the changes on ultrasound scans when there's a change like that just from relieving pressure. This is not the same as just relieving pressure. This is a complete brain coming out of basically nowhere. No,
that would be ridiculous. That would be like if a baby in an ultrasound is seen with missing an arm, and then the baby's born and all of a sudden an arm grows. Yeah. Same thing. It doesn't happen. That's not reality.
Yeah, it's not something that they could have just missed. So another excuse that we've heard a lot when we've tried to share Ellie's story is that our bodies are just amazing and they spontaneously just heal themselves. Isn't it amazing how the bodies are? And this is false. This is very false, and it's just an excuse for not believing that this is just the Lord's hand that has done it. Because if brain growth happens just because the human body is amazing, then why were there problems to begin with? That wouldn't make any sense. Why does anyone have any physical problems if the bodies just heal themselves spontaneously all of the time because they're so amazing? So this is not the same thing as like getting a little cut and then that healing on your arm. So like with the example that Brian used, if somebody comes out with an arm cut off, it doesn't spontaneously decide to grow because the body needs it, because the bodies are so amazing. So coincidentally, her brain growth happened as we had literally hundreds of Christians praying for Eleanor ever since she was in utero, actually, at least since 20 weeks when we found out that she had problems. And we had already been praying before that for her, quite frankly. But we've had hundreds of people praying for her and sending us messages and all sorts of things, lifting her up in prayer. And then this happens.
Yeah. So I do want to reiterate that throughout our journey with Ellie, before she was born, the doctors were completely hopeless for us, and so much so that we even had them setting up services for grieving and everything before she was born. And we're sitting here, looking at her heartbeat and all of her vitals, and everything's going great. But because they see that she has no eyes and she has a brain condition where she only had a third of a brain, they were completely hopeless. We got laughed at. They suggested that we have an abortion, and even after she was born, had another doctor come in from Seattle that said, they did tell you that you could have terminated the pregnancy, right? Meanwhile, she's laying there under an incubator, just staying warm. It's like, completely hopeless situation is what they were pitching to us. And so now that a miracle has happened, where they see the impossible right in front of their eyes, they refuse to believe it. And it's not just the doctors. Some of you watching this video right now may be a person that's like that. You want to refuse to step out in faith and acknowledge that the Lord has done something. This is just one small story. Ellie's little story. A lot of us out there have miracle stories. The Lord is active in our lives, and the Lord is using Ellie right now to reach doctors and you and many other people out there through her Facebook pages and stuff. And the Lord just cares about people so much. Mm-hmm. He's willing to get their attention by having a problem happen, and then we put our faith in Him, we pray, and then the Lord brings a miracle about, well, what are we going to do with this miracle? That's the question that we're leaving with you right now. What are we going to do with this miracle? Maybe you're watching this because your child, you found out that your child that you're pregnant with is having an issue inside. Well, now's the time for you to put your faith in the Lord. Get a prayer network going, okay? It's time to put your faith in the Lord. This is the time to do it. Don't fail this test. The Lord's handing you a microphone, and the world is listening to hear what you have to say right now. Don't look at this as a bad thing. Look at it as the Lord is reaching out to you, and He's putting you in a situation to rely on Him and His strength. Mm-hmm. He will not let you down. He won't. We've even known people who have lost their babies after they were 28 days old or something like that, even a few days old, and they've said we would never trade that for anything in the world. And of course, their doctors were trying to get them to have abortions as well. So do not give in to that. It's evil. It's wicked. Now's the time for faith, and Ellie is here as a testimony to everybody to put your faith in the Lord, and He's going to do something great. So we're glad that you took the time to watch this, and we hope that God will sincerely bless you, and may our thoughts and prayers be with you, and God bless you. Make the right decision.
If you found this video helpful, please click the button below and subscribe to our channel. We're going to have lots of other videos coming your way for parents of babies with blindness and brain disorders. And they're all going to be starring Ellie!